Hello, and thank you for joining us for our webinar series led by PPMD's Adult Advisory Committee, the PAAC. This webinar will be focused on travel and travel tips and will be presented by Colin Worth, Colin Wrench, and Michael Gaglione. And will also be moderated by members of PPMD, Annie Kennedy, and myself, Kevin Counterman. So I'll be handing it off now to Colin Wrench.
Hello there. Our first webinar is entitled Rolling Around the World, Traveling Tips for the Duchenne Community. And as Kevin said, my name is Colin Wrench. I'll be going through the first slides for you. The first slide has to do with travel planning. Always the sort of most exciting but maybe most tricky part of the whole process. And so obviously Google is your best friend, naturally, as it is in many cases. I'm going to look up accessible and the country or place that you're going to. For instance, accessible New York City or accessible Germany, accessible, etc. And this will often give you many great hits and some resources that you can sort of begin to explore how you can approach visiting your desired location. And there's many travel guides that exist online and in print to aid with those of us traveling with disabilities. There's many great books I've seen and also many online resources. There are many blogs such as Curb Free with Corey Lee. That's a great blog and it gives you many options. Corey travels to a lot of places and tells you how he did it, which is really great. One of the most recent ones from my neck of the woods, Michigan, Corey visited Ludington, Michigan, which is a kind of a town right on Lake Michigan, and he tells you how he did it, how he managed the beaches, and all that kind of stuff. It's a great resource. Spin the Globe, that's another resource that's very useful. And of course there is a Facebook community dedicated to accessible travel and wealth. All right, so finding accessible accommodation. That's always one of the biggest challenges. Particularly challenging if you're looking for accommodations out of country where there is no Americans with Disabilities Act. But it can still be plenty challenging in the U.S. as well. So obviously the definition of accessible varies depending on your location. It does not always mean the same thing. Often it's useful to state exactly what you mean instead of saying I'm looking for an accessible room. Maybe you say looking for a roll-in shower, lowered beds, wider doorways, that type of thing. Make sure to specify what you're looking for. Also, another tip here, book directly with the hotel to make sure you get the room. Oftentimes, many travel sites really often cater to just, unfortunately, just typical travelers. And so if you look on kayak.com or another site, often the room that it lists is not the accessible one. And if it does list the accessible one, make sure that you call. Sometimes they're listed at different rates. It can be a little bit confusing. So again, hotels.com or Expedia, sites like that, might not have the most accurate information on accessibility. So make sure you call the hotel specifically. Okay, next fun aspect is figuring out transportation. This takes many forms. In a minute here, Colin Worth will talk about traveling via airplane, but for this aspect, we're just talking about transportation when you're at your location or traveling to maybe a different city or something. Most cities, of course, offer accessible taxi services. These can be pricey depending on what you're looking for, although they're usually the best service. Companies like Uber or Lyft are starting to offer services to those with disabilities. It's not super common, so make sure to check. Cities like Washington, New York, Chicago are offering these services, but many others do not. So can check that out, but often taxi is the way to go. Many cities, of course, have kneeling buses that allow wheelchair users to enter by ramp. We've all, I think, seen those, and those can be good. All right, and in bigger cities, of course, we have the fun of trains and subways. And this is actually a photo of Corey Lee here, minding the gap someplace in Europe. I'm not sure exactly where. But anyway, as you can see, you have to mind the gaps in many cases, as they say in the tube in London. So in this case, he's using a little ramp that it looks like they put down for him. Many countries, I traveled in Vienna, they have a little ramp that folds down, very small threshold ramp, but it's often only about 1 in every 4th subway car, and it's always the last subway car in the multi-car unit. So it's often hard to find it, and you need to know where to look for it. But once you do know, it makes it easier. And again, level entry is not always common, but it does exist. Staff will often have to help you. And it also varies in the U.S., I know, in the metro. In Washington, often you can just drive over the gap. So you just kind of need to know what you're looking for. But they can often be accessible. Many European cities also have streetcars. Many of these are accessible, but you need to check ahead of time. Many of them are older models, and so they do not all have the accessible. But in several cities I've been to, you can get an app that tells you when the next accessible streetcar is coming, so that makes it quite easier. And then, of course, if you really want to expand your options, you're still able to use a manual wheelchair or have someone push you, or bring a lighter chair, as will be discussed later. And then you can, of course, go in more personal vehicles. Okay, and with this, I'm now handing it off to Colin Worth.
Hi there. So I'm going to talk about airplane travel, which I found is a very scary aspect for a lot of people, but definitely is doable if you know some tips. So unfortunately, at this time, you can't bring your own power wheelchair on an airplane, but and the wheelchair is stored in the cargo hold of the plane. So, but they do have wheelchairs that help roll you onto the plane. As you see, this one on the right here, it's a small, called an aisle chair, and they use that too. So when you get at the end of the jetway, right before you board the plane, they have you transfer into this aisle chair, and then they take your power chair or your manual chair, and then put that under the plane. But then they roll you onto the plane on this small chair, and then you can transfer over to this seat. So obviously make sure when you're booking seats to get an aisle seat, and often many airlines offer the ability for you to get a seat that's in the bulkhead. And I just want to give a shout out to All Wheels Up, who's one of our PAAC members, Alan Chalet, is working on to help allow us so we can bring our wheelchairs directly onto the plane instead of having to put them in the cargo hold and worry about damages.
Colin, this is Annie. Can I just ask a question? One of the things that we often hear from travelers who use wheelchairs is that it's critical to make sure that you're booking a seat that has a removable armrest. So that would be one question I had for the three of you as to whether or not you find that to be important. And then the other thing we often hear from people is that there are some preferred airlines, such as Southwest and JetBlue, that don't have a first-class cabin, so that you don't have to travel through a full section of an airplane in the transport chair before getting to your seat. And so if maybe you or the others could comment on whether or not those are things that you have experienced or think is important as a part of this.
Yes, thanks for inputting there, Annie. Yeah, definitely make sure your seat has a movable armrest. I usually, when I get on an airplane, I'm able to slide over onto the chair. But also, I think there's some like transfer lifts, like you would need two people to hold you from underneath, and so it is possible to get into the seat if the armrest isn't movable. And I'll also say bulkhead seats typically do not have movable armrests, so that's something you have to weigh the benefits and and also what you're saying about preferred airline. Yes, I would definitely say Southwest is a preferred one because you don't have to reserve a seat, but also other airlines like should be able to. I think they usually book safe bulkhead seats for those with disabilities if you would prefer to use them. So, JetBlue is another good airline as well.
Yeah, I often just call after I book my seats, even if they're not even like seats that are together, because I want to make sure I'm traveling with my PCA or my parent or whatever, whoever I'm going with. But if I call, usually they help to move your seats further up toward the front of the plane. And I usually travel with Delta typically, and honestly don't have too many issues with that. I have heard that Southwest is better. I kind of like being able to at least know that I purchased the seats. I know that they're supposed to technically give precedence, not precedence, I'm sorry, they're supposed to give preference to those disabilities, but I often just like to buy the seat, but usually Delta works pretty well with that too.
Super, thank you. I think that's really helpful.
To go back to saying how they put the wheelchair under the plane, this is what can be a pretty scary part. So you got to make sure your wheelchair is protected when going underneath, because you don't want to end up getting to your destination and having the headache of a broken wheelchair. So some tips to protect your wheelchair are to secure your joystick and on the other sensitive wheelchair part in bubble wrap. And I have, we'll talk about this in the next slide more, but I have a portable wheelchair that I take the joystick off and put it in between the two wheelchair cushions, which will definitely protect it, because that seems to be the part that is damaged the most often, and it's pretty critical because you can't do much when you can't control your wheelchair. So, and also add signs to tell them, the ground staff, where to lift on the wheelchair to make sure, again, none of the parts are damaged. So, and also tell them, maybe put a sign to tell them how to engage and disengage the chair so it can be pushed manually. And also, as you see here on the right, the wheelchair is folded down pretty compact. Just do that to make sure that there's enough room at the door for the plane, the door for the cargo hold, because this this obviously varies from aircraft type, because obviously a smaller regional jet is not going to have as much room.
Colin, Kevin here, question for you. Sorry, Colin.
Yeah, go ahead.
Question for you. I was wondering, have you or any of the others on today had any issues with the size of the plane, and have you ever had any problems with having to switch a flight because one plane's cargo hold was too small to accommodate your wheelchair?
I've not had that. Since the portable one I have is pretty compact.
Yeah, I would agree with Colin.
Okay.
Go for it, Colin. Sorry.
And also, when you can go to the airline website, and they often have the dimensions of the cargo hold, so you can make sure that it will fit.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, just to check ahead of time.
Yeah, there's also, there's like any site. I think I found this particular site. It's called wheelchairtravel.org, and they have just a web page that has all the different cargo dimensions, so you can compare. So I usually look at that before I pick the airplane.
Great.
Can you restate Can you restate that website, Colin?
Sure. It's, wheelchairtravel.org, but I can send the full URL if that would be helpful.
Yeah, we can add it to our resource page. Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's also the first part of the website under the image there. Am I correct with that?
Yeah, and also at the end you saw there that make sure when you if your chair is damaged, to report any damages to the airline. They're supposed to cover the cost for you, but sometimes that can be difficult. But that is you can possibly get costs covered. And so I was telling you earlier about how I have a portable power wheelchair. So obviously, I think even myself, I'm afraid to bring my fancy Permobile power chair, which is 400 pounds. So I got this a chair like this that's portable. On the right, you see the picture how it folds up into a nice compact position, so it can easily fit underneath the plane. But there's a few different models. Most of them can be found just by searching accessible power chair on Google. The one that I have is the Easy Light Cruiser. They've actually got a bunch of models. Ones that have different size rear motor wheels and also different varying width. The only thing is it is a rear wheel drive, which can be a bit of adjustment if you're used to a mid wheel or front wheel, but it's definitely nice to have this folding option, so it can easily be traveled with. And also, many people, I think Colin Wrench mentioned that you can also travel with a manual wheelchair if you're not sure how a power wheelchair will work at your destination. So that's all for me, and we're going to pass it on to Michael Gaglione.
Hi, it's Michael Gaglione. Okay, so this is about cruise ships. I haven't really been on any cruise ships, but, okay, so, like hotels, cruise ships have accessible room options. Make sure to book far in advance, rooms sell out quickly. You'd want to contact the cruise company directly for more information. Research details on accessibility of onshore excursions.
Has anyone been on a cruise before? The Collins, either of you guys been on a cruise?
I went on a cruise when I think when I was 5 years old, but I don't really remember it, but we're planning possibly next summer to go on a cruise in Northern Europe to I guess to see Scandinavia and the Baltic.
Cool. You'll have to report back to us then.
Okay, recommended locations to visit. Most cities in the United States, well, this is very accessible because of the ADA. Other countries with improved accessibility, such as Japan. Japan is focusing on barrier-free access for their aging population. Modern European countries, including Denmark, Germany, Sweden, and the Netherlands, have improved infrastructure. Australia, New Zealand, these are the locations to visit. Canada, Singapore, Barcelona, Spain, London, England. I've been to, like, the Grand Canyon, and, that's pretty accessible to pass around. It has a nice path that you can look over the, don't want to get too close.
Yeah, and then, okay. Go ahead, MJ.
What else have I gone? I've gone to, I've been over a lot of different places. So there's a lot of places that are very accessible that you can do there's hiking paths that we've found, different places we've gone and around the country. So that's pretty cool.
Great. Colin, do you want to talk about some of the places you've been and maybe tell us a little bit more about these photos that are here?
Okay, I'll start. I've been to numerous places throughout the U.S. Most memorable places I've been, however, were abroad. So I've been on 2 occasions to Vienna, Austria, and that's the picture you see on the slide 9. That's my friends Luke and Matt, who went to Hope College with me. We were on a trip through Hope College that is called the Vienna Summer School. So students can be in Vienna for 3 weeks, either in May or June, or 6 weeks in May and June. And so that's us standing in front of a statue of Strauss, he's the composer of the Blue Danube Waltz. That's his claim to fame. And so, I really recommend that. I'm also planning a trip to Berlin this summer to do some research for some graduate work I'm doing. Those are the 2, those locations are my 2 abroad experiences, and hopefully the Berlin will be as fun as Vienna. So.
And what was kind of the hardest part of traveling to these countries, and what was the easiest part for you, if you remember?
Well, the trip there was actually helped through the school uses a travel agency, so that helps with a lot of it. That being said, the finding accessible accommodations was the most difficult part for that trip. We ended up finding a sort of reasonably priced hotel, like I think it was a hotel that gave special discounts for students or things like that, because most of the students stayed with in people's homes, which would have been kind of a nice experience. So that's unfortunately what you sort of give up, but if you want to actually travel there and be there, then you need to make sure that you can have some place to sleep that works with all of your equipment. So I would say that's the trickiest thing. Also just a mindset thing. Just bear in mind that many places, because people with disabilities might not be in the community as much as they are in America, in the U.S. rather, you'll have to get over there will be some kind of questioning glances, and not just from children, from people of every walk of life. So you just need to know that they might not be being rude, they might just kind of be curious. So just be mindful of that.
That's good advice. Thanks for sharing. Colin, do you want to briefly touch on your trips to Japan?
Yeah, so last summer I went to Japan with my whole family. As you see on the picture on the right, with my sister. As you mentioned, Japan actually has pretty good accessibility because it is a very modern country with fancy high-speed trains and computers and all that, but also because Japan has an aging population, they're making sure those people are taken care of, but it's also good for those with disabilities like us. And just even though there are ancient temples in Japan, like this one on the right, they do try to do their best to accommodate those with disabilities, but that can always know that can be a bit iffy. But in the modern city of Tokyo, the accessibility is pretty great, and all the trains are quite easy to access as well.
Great. Thanks for sharing.
Okay, national parks. I've gone to a lot of national parks. I think I got the National Park Service lifetime pass, so I don't know where it is, but so that's a good thing for us. And some parks are better accessibility than others. So I've gone to I've gone to Yellowstone, and that's pretty. We did a lot of. I was able to do a lot of stuff there, and it's really nice there, and it was really hard to plan. It's really hard to plan a trip like that because we flew out to Denver, and then we drove there from there. So my mom planned that whole thing out. And
okay, now I was wondering though, I did have a question about this. On whether when you arrive there, do you kind of talk to the park rangers, or do you call ahead of time and maybe schedule to meet with one of the park rangers at these national parks to kind of see, some accessible routes, or to get some helpful hints on accessible cabins or places to stay near the national park? Do you try to kind of plan a lot of this preemptively, and do you find park rangers to be very helpful in guiding you throughout the park?
We usually just like go, and like my mom we usually have like a map of like where like the more accessible areas are. So like, but we would like get a hotel at like different places along our trip, because we weren't there. We weren't there the whole time, so we were staying other places too. So didn't really ask park range. We just kind of did things found things as we went along, kind of like, because we like to just look at everything.
You all had a pretty good plan, and I think that's good advice, just to make sure that ahead of time that everyone has a solid plan on what they're going to do and what they're going to be able to when they visit each national park.
So I had a question for you guys, if that's okay if I hop in, Kevin, real quick. So Colin Wrench had mentioned when you were going through some of the places you've gone and showed one of the pictures that there was a picture, I believe, with some of your friends that I think you had gone to Hope College with. And so one of that prompted me to think, when you're traveling, some of your trips, I believe, have been with family. Some, I know you do travel with PPMD sometimes to attend conferences with us and to be presenters and to advocate and to testify before Congress, et cetera. And I also believe that some of you have done fellowships and programs abroad. So I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit, those of you who've traveled, who travels with you? How do you identify personal care attendants? Are your personal care attendants typically family members, or have you ever had hired personal care attendants travel with you? And if so, where have you secured those personal care attendants, and how have you made those arrangements? Are they people that you have worked with at home that come with you, or are they people you hire where you're going? So if you could just talk a little bit through that, because I'm sure there are a lot of people listening who would love to travel, and I think we've addressed a lot of the logistics of the trip itself, but as we all know, there's a really big logistic around daily life. And so if you could talk just through a little bit of who travels with you, how you get there, and then anything else that you think would be relevant for people to know about that arrangement that you've made. So maybe Colin Wrench, we could start with you.
Yes, I mostly have traveled with my family. In that case, I was traveling with two of my classmates, although there were other members of our group that we were traveling with as well. So that was pretty helpful. If, say, one of them needed, like their hands were full, then we could ask one of our classmates to hold something for us. But by and large, it was mostly the three of us. And that's usually the group. I don't recommend traveling with less than 3 people if you're going abroad, unless they require very little sleep to function. It makes it a lot easier. There's just a lot of things to manage, just let alone getting on the airplane when you have to, grab, your headrest or, battery, that kind of thing, backpacks off your chair. It's just helpful to have another set of hands or be able to tell, the airplane, the flight attendants, etc., how to assist you. But yeah, I usually travel with my parents. And I travel usually for short periods with just one, like with my personal care assistant or just my mom, for example. But just know, like, how much you can do. Like, you might not be able to do as much in a day, for instance. Just kind of have to feel each other out and know, kind of not kill each other, so to speak. Yeah, I would say it's easier to travel with at least 2 people, if it's possible.
Great, thanks. Has anybody done anything different than what Colin just described? No? Okay. Great. Kevin, did you have any other additional questions?
Yeah, I did. I had one question about, kind of as we touched on caregivers briefly here. I was wondering if you had any advice for someone traveling with you before the trip, whether they should get into a certain state of mind, have a little bit more patience traveling in certain situations, and just kind of anything that you think that they would need to know before the trip.
I can speak to that. Yes, like you were saying, Kevin, definitely go at things with an open mind when you're traveling, especially overseas. It can be frustrating at times, but try to enjoy it as much as possible and not let bumps in the road get in the way of enjoying yourself.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's great advice, Colin. Well, thank you guys all so much for your presentation today. I really enjoyed learning your perspectives about this topic. And if the audience has any questions or would like to get in touch with our presenters or any of the members of the PAAC, please feel free to reach out to us. One of the best ways to do so now is to join our newly created social media page. You can find us on Facebook. It's the Duchenne/Becker Teen and Adult Community, powered by the PAAC. You'd have to search for that in your Facebook search bar and then request to join, as it is a closed group. And then we'd add you there on, and we'll eventually start posting these webinars there as well. So thank you all.